The time is 9:11, and so before we turn to our next item on the agenda, which is public comment, I will turn to Parliamentarian Johnson to call roll and establish a quorum. Here.
Present.
Member Bradford?
Here.
Member Grill? Member Grill is absent. Member Holder? Here. Member Holder is present. Member Johnson Sawyer? Member Johnson Sawyer is absent. Member Montgomery Steph? Here. Member Montgomery Steph is present. Member Tamaki?
Here. Here.
Member Tamaki is present. Madam Chair, there are 9 task force members, and the number necessary for a quorum is 5. The numbers present today is 7. A quorum has been established.
Thank you, Parliamentarian Johnson. Thank you, members of the task force and members of the public. Welcome to day 2 of our September 2022 hearing. We will now turn to public comment, but before we do so, I just want to remind everyone to be respectful. Everyone has 3 minutes each. Let's not interrupt folks as they give their public comment. And this time, today, before we line up, we're going to go to the phone lines first. We're going to go to the phone lines first.
Please remember the order that you're in.
Yeah, just remember the order that you're in. Maybe we can get someone, a staff member, to take a list like yesterday. But we're going to try to do the phone lines first. Excuse me. So a staff member will be taking your name down, and then you can stay seated, and then we'll call you up when it's time for the in-person comments. But we're going to go to the phone lines first.
Okay, good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Aisha Martin Walton. I'm with the Department of Justice. And the task force would like to hear from you. The public comment period will be for 1 hour, and each person will have 3 minutes to speak. And just be advised that as you reach the 3 minutes, you may be politely interrupted. And however, the task force encourages everyone to participate at every meeting. There is a public comment period, and as always, you may submit your written comments at any time via email at reparationstaskforce@doj.ca.gov. As Chair Moore has indicated, we are going to take the remote callers initially, and allow 30 minutes for those callers who are on the line waiting, and those of you who are here in person. The task force wants to hear everyone, so we appreciate your patience, and you will be speaking after the callers. So if you'll have it, take a seat when you can, and we'll get started. So I believe I have Alan, who is our operator assistant, who is working with us today. Alan, do we have the first caller?
Yes, our first
The
line will
acoustics
be
carry,
line
so
14.
we have to
Go
keep
ahead.
it down to hear.
Alan, do
Line
we-
14, your line is open. Go ahead.
Peace, y'all. My name is Cash Gaines. I'm a young reparationist raised in California, Oakland, Alameda, Chula Vista, Escondido, El Cajon, La Mesa. All right. And I first want to say that y'all might know me as the 40 acres and a Tesla guy, but I'm starting to hear more and more that the 40 acres needs to be a federal claim. So I wanted to shout out Gavin Newsom for president before I begin. As well, I want to mention the direct cash payments portion of this reparation claim, because a lot of people can focus on the other parts, our harms, other remedies, but I like to focus on the numbers. In Oregon, they've offered Senate Bill 619, which I believe should be a blueprint for what cash payment reparations could look like. It suggests lifetime payments of $123,000 a year tax-free. We need to make that proportional in each state if we're going to do it in California. And California versus Oregon is a 39% cost of living increase. So that would mean $177,000 minimum per Black American in California per year for life. I know that California has a 97 billion surplus, so I don't necessarily want to hear the excuses about the thief not having enough money to pay us in modern day. I can't stress enough that reparations has to be economic, has to be monetary based, as well as land grants, as well as protected class status and a lot of other things. But I know that Oregon has already set a precedent by putting numbers on page, and we need to work from that to a bigger number because California is a way more expensive place and a way bigger economy. Thank you guys for letting me rock.
Thank you so much. Before we go to the next caller, I'd just like to formally acknowledge that Member Grills is present. You're welcome. All right, Alan, next caller, please.
Line 21.
Good morning. My name is Rose Cannon, and I'm calling from Evanston, Illinois. And I know that today you will be talking about the potential for domestic programs across California and also across the United States. I basically represent Evanston Rejects Racist Reparations, and we are a small city in the Midwest who is touting itself to be the first reparations city, municipality offering reparations. I'm here to say that that our program has failed and is potentially failing. Municipal reparations can never be the solution. A $25,000 housing allotment has been specified for some of the elderly people in our community, and only 123 of those people have been identified, and only 13 have benefit from this $25,000 reparations program. Six of the elderly people have already passed because the program is not being able to be funded correctly like it was stated it was to be funded. We were supposed to use a 3% tax on a cannabis store that is in the city of Evanston. And as you know, state of Illinois is one of the most conservative states with regard to legalization of marijuana. So the revenue coming in from that store is not substantial, has not been substantial to fund this program. And we are failing. And I just want to say that municipal programs like the one that they've been trying to do in Evanston, and which we understand is being touted across the nation to various other municipalities as a solution for reparations, is not sufficient. The cities do not have the pockets to pay us. It is a debt owed to our people by the U.S. government, and we support the California Reparations Task Force as a first step, which should meld eventually into the U.S. Form of real reparations. We ask that the municipalities that are being courted by the Evanston folks are going across the country saying, this is the program you need. It is not the program you need. It is a failed program. And I rest my case with that. And thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments this morning.
7 lines in
Can we
queue. We'll move
sorry?
next
Can we
to line
turn up the
12.
volume for the audio callers, or maybe put a microphone near wherever the audio source is? I'm having trouble with hearing the virtual callers. And then I also would just ask the audience, as you all are already doing, to keep it down so we could hear. Thank you.
Line 12, your line is open. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Bonia Quarles. I'm a native of California. I live in Riverside County. My father's ancestors were brought to this country in chains and then forced into around Charleston, South Carolina. 12 generations of pain, trauma, and family displacement. My father escaped the South by going into the military at age 17. His father before him had done the same thing. In fact, during my grandmother's life, Black women in the South had the power to re-enlist their spouses for military service. My grandmother exercised this option, and I'm not sure how my grandfather felt about it. But they dreamed of different and better lives as they worked to take care of immediate life needs. They planted seeds of hope in their seeds, and they dreamed of a better life for them. And while they never left the southern shores of South Carolina or the Ichi Gullah culture, they saw hope in the future. And so we come. Many families come. This great migration to California from the South and from all over the world, people wanting to escape racism in all its forms, only to find it here, sometimes masked and sometimes not, but ever amorphous, working to create a permanent underclass of black-skinned people on the backs of black-skinned people. I think the point I'd like to make today is that reparations is not just a dream, it will soon be a reality. How it will look has yet to be decided, but I'm sure you will have great influence and power over that. It seems that one key step to ensuring that reparations is done is to avoid the false dichotomy that racism has only affected us if we were direct descendants of enslaved people in America. Racism doesn't check lineage. Racism doesn't check birth certificates. It errs on the side of itself, and for anyone that looks black, you will be taxed, the black tax. We've been impacted by it as black people living in California, regardless of what country you or your ancestors came from or where your ancestors were enslaved. Slavery never ended, it just morphed. Instead of trying to craft or draft something that will adhere to Prop 209, let us think beyond that and focus on what is best for us as black folks. I ask that you remain bold and courageous and that you all draft recommendations that are inclusive, because we are sisters and brothers, and as a direct result of slavery and racism, we don't even recognize each other. Reparations must include doing the work of repairing, and I believe that begins with a recommendation that embraces all of us from all over the diaspora that live and suffer in California as black people trying to live. Make recommendations that represent all the beautiful blackness around us. Let someone else come in and offer false dichotomies related to barriers of who should receive reparations in California and who should not you. Let us strengthen our unity around this and not be fragmented or divided based upon
Ms.
spirits
Caller,
of
I am
division.
so sorry to cut you off, but your 3 minutes are up. Thank you so much for your valuable comments this morning. And Alan, can we have the next speaker? And if you could ask them to please speak loudly, that would be great. Thank you.
Line 15, we'll open up your line. Please speak up.
Good morning, Task Force members. My name is James Woodson. I am the Executive Director of the California Black Power Network. As you all know, our organization was a Community Engagement Steering Committee member and a listening session host. Yesterday, I was really encouraged to hear Task Force members speak about the importance of being respectful of each other and allowing for differences. Unfortunately, the premature vote on eligibility has fostered the opposite, working to undermine unity, trust, and credibility in the process. As Contact CBPN was tapped to host listening sessions in December 2021. In January and February of 2022, we worked within the steering committee to plan community engagement with groups like the Black Equity Collective and CJEC. However, in March, the day before your task force meeting, we learned of a secret vote on eligibility happening the following day. We heard about this vote not from the Bunch Center, not from the task force itself, but through another community group's listserv. How that community group found out about the vote before the public did, I don't know, but luckily the task force voted to delay the eligibility vote until later. Unfortunately, the very next month, the task force voted 5-4 for lineage, 2 months before most steering committee members were scheduled to host their listening session. The result of this premature vote was that it first created distraction during our listening sessions, where participants were quite confused by the fact that the task force would ask us to ask an eligibility question after it had already decided on the issue. Second, it raised questions about whether this task force is serious about engaging community and receiving community input and feedback from everyone. The task force has yet to hire a comms firm and has yet to make a firm commitment on continuing community engagement. In fact, it was funny to hear a commenter yesterday talk about how Community Coalition was not involved in the eligibility vote which is exactly our point. The task force has made decisions without key stakeholders who have served the Black community for decades being brought to the table. The crux of this issue is not about eligibility itself, but it's about the way that the task force engages community. It's about basic fairness and whether people think this process is authentic or not. If this task force doesn't figure out a way to unite our community, no one will get reparations. As you move forward, the credibility of this task force will hinge on whether you move in partnership with community or move ahead of community. It's not only about what you decide, it's also about how you get there, and you'll need a united front to push your recommendations through the legislature. You will not get that united front on your current course. Favoritism, secrecy, and unfairness will only cause more division among our people. As someone who can trace their lineage back to chattel slavery on both sides, and someone who has indigenous ancestry,
Excuse
I pray
me,
you
sir.
take the opportunity to
Thank you
unify
so
our
much for your
people
comments
and do
this
your part
morning.
to
Your
ensure that
time
all
is
of us
up. We
recognize this
appreciate you
process.
calling in. All right, our next speaker,
And ladies,
Alan.
and as a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, if you do want to register a comment, press 1 then 0. We'll go next to line 22.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you speak up just a little?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, but you need
Okay,
to speak
yes.
up.
Okay, all right, thank you. Hi, I am Mara Kialantikad. I am the Los Angeles organizer at the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, or BAJI. BAJI is a Black national organization fighting for the rights of African American and Black migrants through organizing, legal advocacy, research policy, and narrative building to improve the conditions of Black communities by advancing racial justice and migrant rights. We acknowledge the unique experience of slavery in the Black community. Anti-Black racism, however, does not discriminate, distinguish, or care for any hierarchy that we've subconsciously created among ourselves, right? And white supremacy's goal is to cause destruction to all Black people, regardless of where they come from. Slavery and anti-Black racism are really two peas of the same pod. While slavery hypothetically ended, but continues today through the carceral system that all Black people are affected by, not including Black migrants, and has morphed into a system now that's built on anti-Black racism and affects all Black people, regardless of when they came into this country. Slavery and anti-Black racism are not two completely different things. They are inextricably connected. Also, Black migrants and refugees don't come here out of choice or convenience, but because of the effects that U.S. colonialism and imperialism have had across the globe. California and the U.S. should be held accountable for its contribution to that dynamic and not be let off the hook in the form of reparations. Black migrants are the most criminalized immigrant community and suffer from the lowest housing of other immigrant groups, slightly higher employment rates, but have similar low income rates because we're working multiple jobs similar to our Black American counterparts. We acknowledge that there has been work done within the task force to address this issue, but the community has not heard about this soon enough. And as you continue your work, it's important to remember that not only is the Black community not a monolith, but the Black immigrant community is also not a monolith. People arrived in California by different means, but we all have a common experience of being Black in California and suffering from the vestiges of chattel slavery. And it's important, some have noted the effort to disaggregate data, similar to that of the AAPI community, but the AAPI community has also pushed for the disaggregation of data by nationality and ethnicity, right? It's not simply based on a binary distinction between who's born here and what.
Excuse me
Disaggregation
this
does not
morning.
help.
Thank you
It
so
hurts.
much for your comments. We're going to have to move to the next
Thank
caller,
you.
but thank you so much for your comments. And Chair Moore, Alan, before we continue, Chair Moore, just a time check-in. It's 9:30. We have time for about 3 more callers. Alan, we have time for about 3 more callers.
All right.
Can you release the next caller? Thank you.
Line 20. Yes, just one moment. Line 42, your line is open.
Good morning. My name is Shayla Bonner. I am the Civic Engagement and Lead Organizer at the Safe Return Project in Contra Costa County. We represent Black and Brown formerly incarcerated people and those impacted by the criminal legal system. Our mission is to end mass incarceration and re-enfranchise those who have been disenfranchised by the criminal legal system. I'm calling to express my disappointment that 5 task force members would vote on eligibility prior to hosting listening sessions and reviewing community input. The economic success of California would not be possible without the unpaid, forced, and underpaid labor that Black Californians contribute to the founding and development of the state. It is imperative that all Black people have their voices included in the process of developing the recommendations, including eligibility, that the task force will present to the governor. It was mentioned yesterday that there were some counties and some Black communities that have not been reached to weigh in on what Black reparations could look like to them. The decision to determine eligibility prematurely is very disappointing. I ask that moving forward, the task force will make a stronger effort to solicit community input before making major decisions on reparations framework. This effort should include hiring and retaining a reputable communications firm to help promote your work in the community, continue to put significant resources towards community engagement, and partnering with community-based organizations to ensure you are reaching the entire community. Thank you all for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Alan, next caller.
Line 16, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good morning. This is Angela Nirvana. Who should be eligible for reparations? Every American freedman in the state of California that is living with the vestiges of what happened in that 500-page report prior to AB 3121 being signed into law, and those who were legislated out of the state before and thereafter. As for that Bunch report, I'm giving it the side eye to have polled non-American freedmen who haven't attended a hearing nor listening sessions. American freedmen have never been polled by the state nor the feds about how they spend trillions of our reparations dollars on whites and immigrants, refugees, and incessant wars. And I don't believe that they said words like monetary no cash of their own volition. No one talks like that. They were prompted. As for what I believe reparations should be, direct cash payments. No more programs that you give with the left and give away with the right to whites and immigrants. Free housing and eco-friendly neighborhoods, an American freedman town akin to Chinatown full of our grant-funded businesses exclusively. Our own Office of Freedmen Affairs akin to the Office of New Americas you've established for the immigrants. Anti-Freedmen Defamation League and enforced protections. 20% of the employees in the public and private sectors, from the low-skilled position through upper-level management, with a California salary that offers full benefits and a pension. And free education is nice, but please understand it doesn't guarantee us a job, paying a California wage. It is purely symbolic. All of our debts should be waived, and we shouldn't have to pay taxes. You should also give us 800 credit scores. Lastly, California, it would behoove you to deliver our reparations prior to Governor Newsom running for president, lest these hearings will be a grift for our vote in 2024. Thank you. I'll end there.
Line 4, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Chantel Bacon.
Can you speak up, please?
I have lineage from 1804. Hear me?
We need you to speak up, please. We can't quite hear you.
Okay, Chantel Bacon, born and raised in California. My maternal, paternal ancestry dates back to 1804. We have roots Alabama, Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Carolina. The Black American, formerly classified American Negro lineage matters. Our history matters. Our lineage is the reason we have the 13th and the 14th Amendments. We are steadily being erased by people in leadership and immigrants in their attempt to group us in every other dark-skinned person in the U.S. and confuse our history. Since our classification and the emancipation of the 4 million formerly enslaved, the federal government, state, local government, city leadership, and local police departments have attempted to control our movements in social settings, housing, employment, education. This is well documented with the history of blood quantum laws, one-drop rule policies, fugitive slave laws, Reconstruction loitering laws, vagrancy laws, black codes known as Jim Crow laws, the Rumford Act, the passing of the Federal and California Fair Employment and Housing Act, Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education. I would like to add the 1968 Kerner Commission report to be recorded in this task force. We have been public enemy number one. We are still here. We are fighting to be recognized, to take back our identity, our history, our citizenship in these United States. As a present-day Black American, foundational Black American descendant of the U.S. freedmen still residing in California, I'd like to have it recorded. The contributions to our fight here in California. Delilah Beasley, born 1867, wrote California Black Pioneers, Slavery in California in 1918, and she also wrote a book, The Negro Trailblazers of California, 1918. I would like to recognize Callie House is the reason we are here. She was the one who pioneered reparations for our labor. Frederick Douglass, Ida B. Wells, Philip A. Randolph. The list can go on about our lineage here in these United States. This repair is for the foundational people who were here. We are, I know I ran out of time, so I want to end so other people can talk. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for your comments. Chair Moore, that would conclude our callers that have tried to call in. Those of you who were not able to speak today, we really appreciate you taking the time to call in. And please know that you can submit written comments to reparationstaskforce@doj.ca.gov. And at every meeting, you will have an opportunity to call in. So thank you so much. So Chair Moore, shall I proceed? Okay, we have about 25 folks who want to comment this morning. So when I call your name, we'll do it by threes, if that's okay. So will Jill H., Elmer F., and Daniel L. approach the mic, please? Okay, 1 second. All right, thank you so much. You may begin. I will be giving you a time card to just help you know where you are.
Thank you, I appreciate
All right.
that.
Thank you so much. You may begin.
So I'd like to thank the California Reparations Task Force for providing me an opportunity to present to you today. This is just a section of a testimony that I gave to the Beverly Hills Unified School District in regards to supporting a black candidate at the time who was discriminated against. My name is Jill Humphreys, and I'm a graduate of Beverly Hills High School, class of 1983, and Beverly Hills Hall of Fame inductee. 43 years ago, my parents, Vernon and Richetta Humphreys, Southern refugee transplants, fleeing Jim Crow segregation, enrolled their 3 children, Bridget, Vernon, and myself, in Los Angeles voluntary busing program. Their intent was to ensure their children received the best education that was denied them and to increase their chances for a better livelihood by taking part in the civil rights revolution that was occurring throughout the U.S. My siblings and I attended Westwood Elementary, Emerson Junior High, and Beverly Hills High, even though I grew up right here in Baldwin Hills. I am the classes of 77, 80, and 83. 43 years later, I stand before you as Dr. Jill M. Humphreys, a collegiate professor and an international affairs professional who has taught in some of the best universities in the United States and who's traveled the world. My sister, Dr. Bridget Humphreys, is a pediatric anesthesiologist, a chef, and a pilot, and my brother, Vernon James Humphreys, is a classical valence pianist and a retired LA Unified School District secondary school math teacher. The reason why I present this to our community is that, folks, my parents coming from the South, and this was denied them, right, made sure that their children had every opportunity, right? However, these integration programs, while they extracted the best of us, all of us out of our communities with the intent of us never coming back to our communities, diluted our communities. While I am confident that my siblings and I would have successfully been professionals, whether we went through this integration program or not, right? It provided us with an invaluable opportunity to socialize in a diverse setting, receive a first-class academic education, exposure to extracurricular activities that were denied others, other black and brown children, other people from different class backgrounds. And so Beverly Hills' social and scholastic environment contributed to us being well-rounded individuals with an appreciation for living in a multicultural society and a global world. It's for these reasons that I understand the significance of receiving quality education and having committed myself to educating young adults, not just here in the United States, but I also represent the U.S. government as one of your professors that has taught in Ethiopia and South Africa, having just returned 5 months ago. So I find not just Beverly Hills High School, I find our entire educational system, primary, secondary, and higher education, brutal. Brutal for those of us. It is not simply just receiving a non-monetary transfer to go into these institutions. We must fundamentally change the culture and the norms. Please, I teach in these institutions. I can tell you exactly what is done, not only to our children, but to all of our children. Let me just say that. I mentor all people that come primarily to black students, black professors. Let me just share this with you.
Ms. Jill, I'm
Thank
so
you.
sorry, your time's up.
Thank you very
so much for your comments and for coming out today. All right, our next speaker, please go ahead.
Yes, my name is Elmer Fonza. I'm here today with my brother, Chief Melford Fonza, and my nephew, Trent Muir. I'm here to talk about our third generation grandfather, Nelson Bell. As I talk, handouts will be distributed to the task force. Nelson Bell, one of the few African-American landowners during the gold rush in Coloma, California, passed away in 1869. At that time, his land and personal property were put into probate. His personal property was later sold by the probate administrator, but the sale of his land was not recorded in the probate report. The land owned by Nelson Bell is now part of a California state park. We have good reasons to believe that we are the descendants of Nelson Bell. We have historical records and document from a certified genealogist and information from Ancestry.com that indicate our kinship to Nelson Bell, and in fact, he's my third generation grandfather. We have employed a certified genealogist in the state of Virginia to research historical records in the state regarding Nelson Bell, and so far the results have been very positive. I and other family members have the opportunity to visit Marshall Goldfield State Park in July of this year. We were shown the land once owned by Nelson Bell and his grave site at the Pioneer Cemetery. It is unclear how the state acquired the land once owned by a few minority settlers in Coloma, but we believe it was by eminent domain. Our purpose is to seek reparations once this task force completes its work and the process of filing a claim is in place. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments this morning. All right, next, Mr. Daniel, please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Daniel Lee. I am the current and first black mayor of Culver City, California. I'm happy to be here this morning. Just wanted to talk about 3 things specifically. One, I was very happy to see that harms around education were mentioned yesterday in the hearings, but I wanted to zero in the last 2 decades or so. Black women in particular have been some of the best people matriculating when it comes to undergraduate and graduate education, but I wanted to bring up what we've been talking about federally for a while. As people matriculate, they accumulate student loans, so I want to make sure that we consider student loan repayment or student loan absolution as a part of reparations. Secondly, I wanted to talk a little bit about what Ronald Reagan did both as governor of California and president. In that context, he more or less deregulated our social service system. And as you know, racism comes with mental health effects that has a particular effect on African American people. I want us to consider mental health and mental health reparations as we consider reparations more generally. Secondly, Ronald Reagan and his staff made it so that the University of California system and the California State University system were not essentially free as they were before. If you wanted to get a higher degree, bachelor's, master's, PhD, that has had a deleterious effect, as I mentioned before and in the context of student loan repayments. Lastly, our city in Culver City, we moved forward with an apology for our city's history as a sundown town last year. Earlier this year, we moved forward with reparations. Just this past Monday, we moved forward with moving with a historical context study. I just want the entire task force to keep smaller cities that are moving forward in mind and in a complementary manner as the reparations task force moves forward with their work. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for your comments this morning. Could we have Bruce W., Liz C., and Dr. Magella? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Please approach the mic.
Thank you. The spirit in me greets the spirit in each of you. Bruce Wheatley, Wheatley Institute. Yes, I'm 6'9". There we go. That feels a little bit better.
Oh, okay.
You know, I don't know if we're off to a good start when you don't serve black folk coffee, but that might just be to my early rise. So,
all right.
Thank you all for your time here. WheatleyInstitute.com. My comments, recommendations come from an investigation that we did looking at the intersection of health and human services and K through 12 education. So with all said, first, much gratitude and appreciation for the committee's diligent and thorough effort to communicate the impact of institutional structural racism, discrimination, and the biased decision-making that has diminished the quality of life for Native Black Americans in California and across the country. Due to the enslavement, this recommendation is centered on separate and unequal education, mental health and physical harm and neglect, and really piggybacks off what this young woman said and the gentleman before me. But due to the enslavement mentality of America's oppressors, the mental health and K through 12 education school referral process for service is culturally destructive for Black Americans. As a result, given the overrepresentation of Black children in special education, probation, foster care systems, primary and essential is a full review and amendments to California's Welfare Institution Code. Case in point, we must look at redefining the definition of severely emotionally disturbed and the criteria that qualifies individuals for this clinical service. We must redefine priority population. Due to the overrepresentation of our kids in these systems, counties, as an example of mental health, do not serve our needs whatsoever. And so central to this issue suggests that higher education repurpose and eliminate terms like field work and case management in social work. The referral for service process reinforces the racist thinking of round up the blacks in the field, and no parent wants their child case management. Therefore, to bring legitimacy to the 1964 Civil Rights Executive Order for Cultural Competency, which has not been met based on the fact that I just laid out, and the recent 2020 Executive Order advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities, given that blacks make up no majority in California City, essential to reversing the institutional systemic structural racism that you've all laid out, is prioritizing Black organization and community leaders for funding to support the transformation, not a program, but the complete transformation of health and human services in K through 12 education. With that, concerning the control over creative control and intellectual life, California Health and Human Service related requests for proposals. Bidding must permit innovators to maintain their intellectual property, program design, process, and service delivery methods. As an example, the state released the RFP recently
sorry,
and
Mr. Mark,
suggested they would
your
have
time is up, but
take their
thank you so
innovation.
much
Thank you
for
all.
coming
Keep
out.
up the good work.
All right, thank you.
Well, let's do it that way. Good morning. I want to really commend you guys on the good work you're doing about reparations. But my name is Liz Chow, and I'm the historian for the Consolidated Board of Realtors and the Sanchez Adobe on Don Felipe, a building with over 200 years of use. And Mr. Bradford, I just saw pictures of you there when you were first getting started in politics. My task force here today is to try to save this Adobe. The original owner or builder, Don Vicente Sanchez, was sent by the Spanish and Mexican government to corral the African Americans, 35 of them, that founded Los Angeles, Pio Pico being one of them, the first governor. So we talk about who was the first governor in the United States. It was black governor, it was Pio Pico. Maria Rita Valdez on Beverly Hills. So we have all these African Americans that escaped Mexico and came to California, which Mexico did not own. And they basically annexed Mexico when the African Americans, or I shouldn't call them Afro-Mexicans, started to do so well. My task force is to turn that adobe, which was built in the late 1700s, right on Don Felipe, because there's a lady here from Baldwin Hills, 3725 Don Felipe. That's literally falling apart because the city wants that lot to provide housing for Metro. So my task force is turn this into a children's museum where children in the 4th grade, no offense to Dr. Dre, but by the time they get to high school, it's too late. They want to be a rapper. We're going to start with basics, going back to, how to penmanship, language classes, how to use a knife and fork. Your kids drive up to Jack in the Box, and then they eat like this. So we have a museum over there that's ready to be retrofitted, because it's 200 years old, and we need to fix it. It also was subject to the sundown laws. You couldn't come in there. And Paul Williams, the architect, was building us something in the West Adams area. I'm going to cut to the chase real quick. You're talking about reparations. The realtors came in 1949 because their land was seized in the Palos Verdes Torrance area, just like Bruce's Beach. We pooled our money together to buy this land, right? And then they snatched it. O'Melveny was the head of the Board of Supervisors at that time. They just snatched the land and pushed us back into the Watts West Adams district. Paul Williams had to use white people to buy land in Watts to build apartments. So when this building became available, at that time was a white women's club with signs that said no blacks, no Asians, no Mexicans after a certain period of time. He thought it was better to buy that. That's a curse because we were building something much nicer in the West Adams district. So I won't go on too much further, but I would invite this task force to please come and tour our adobe. It's so important that we teach our children earlier. I mean, no offense to Beyonce.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you in the
Can I
middle
just
of your
close with
sentence, but your time is up.
Okay, let me just close with this. Please come to our adobe and visit it. If you guys can have a tour, we'd appreciate it. And Senator Bradford, I sent you a big package.
Thank you so much. And now we'll hear from the doctor. Thank you so much for your comments, Ms. Liz.
Is now good?
Yes, please go ahead.
Acknowledgement first to and reverence to my ancestors, stolen people forcibly settled within the socially engineered, violently maintained imaginary borders now known as America. Acknowledgement to the traditional land stewards, the Tongva and Gabrielino peoples, and then finally to my elders in this community with whom I've consulted, requested, and received permission to speak today. To the task force, to the California DOJ, and more specifically to all to convene on behalf of the liberation, restoration, and reparation of African people in the state of California, the U.S., and the world. Good morning. I am Dr. Michaela Bethune, an assistant professor in the Department of African American Studies at Loyola Marymount University. I am a community psychologist trained in community research and action, and I'm here in the capacity of being a black mama, a black scholar, a diasporic African of the world residing in America and in the state of California. I am here to speak on behalf of a group of African people who have neither the personal agency nor the social power to be meaningfully or civically engaged in this process. I am here on the behalf of young black people. I have read and reviewed this task force 500-page interim report and comprehensive account of the systemic, institutional, structural, and existential harms of American white supremacy. The structure and organization of this report carefully lay out the historical and ongoing impact of slavery, racial terror, civic and political disenfranchisement and marginalization, residential segregation, violation and desecration of our communities, education educational segregation, environmental and structural racism, the demonization of Black families, the assault on Black art, culture, scholarship, and identity, stolen labor and opportunity, the criminal injustice system, and the continuance of slavery, mental and physical harm, neglect, and diminished generative reproductive capacity in thriving, and the wealth gap. There is mentioning of the impact of these atrocities on Black infants, youth, and young adults. I've read that report, and in it, the term youth is mentioned 187 times, the term young, 69, the term children, 595, babies, baby, infant, 15. As a scholar on Black youth and adolescents, this leaves me hopeful and also invested in this process. However, from pages 19 to 24, which house the 5 pages of preliminary recommendations, youth was mentioned twice, and children 5 times, and mostly in the context of detailing how incarcerated residents should have access to those children as their caregivers and family unit. My appeal today is for you members of this task force, agents of the DOJ, and members of the General Assembly and government of the state of California to deepen your consideration and commitment to a comprehensive agenda and reparations plan that meaningfully includes and centers the needs of Black youth. May we all seek to see and understand young people not to be only our possessions, but rather the future bearers of this great work of restoring our people to the expansiveness of our humanity and essence. Young people
Dr.
are
Magella,
the Black
I'm
people.
so sorry your time is up, but please, I'm so sorry to interrupt you in the middle of your
Absolutely.
thought.
Please
but-
center our youth. Please center our youth. I'm happy to email the rest of this statement
Oh,
for public comment.
please do, please do. We encourage everyone to use the email. Our next speakers who have signed up are Mark G. So if you could please hold on.
Sure.
Thank you so much for being patient with us. Mark G., Ms. Cryer, and Kevin C. If you could please approach the mic.
How you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, my name is Mark Garth. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, and I'm an American Indian. I'm gonna read an article 4. This is the Treaty of 1866 with the Choctaw and Chickasaw Indians in the United States. It's just a section. And they further agree that all laws shall be equal in their operation upon Choctaws, Chickasaws, and Negroes, and that no distinction affecting the latter shall at any time be made. There's no difference between a Negro and an Indian. Slaves are Indians. Freedmen are Indians. We're all Indians. The only definition of the word Indian means the aboriginal inhabitant of North America.
Please, we have too much conversation going on. If you wish to talk, please go outside.
No, I didn't.
You're interfering with the persons who are speaking. Could someone help us in the back, ask everyone to be quiet, and let us focus? Let this gentleman start over.
Yes, absolutely.
There's no difference between a Negro, a colored person, a Black person. They're all Indians. We're indigenous. I'm speaking for the indigenous people here in the United States who has United States lineage ancestry. This is our land. We own it. We have proof of ownership of our land. It's called the Agricultural Non-Population Schedule from 1850 to 1880. My ancestors made improvements, and we were deprived of that. So that's part of the deprivation and the atrocities that has happened to us. We were deprived of the right to be Indians, and we were deprived of our land patents and annuities that's owed to us. Pursuant to treaty obligations, not what people want to make up or vote on. We don't care about what foreigners think. This is the law. The highest law of the land is this treaty right here and the Constitution. So what we should add to this, to what you guys are doing, it should be included with what you're doing, is just please form a committee to where we can use the Indian treaties, because all the money is here. The allocated money is here. We can go from the date of the treaty to now and allocate the money that's owed to us, the stocks that's owed to us, as well as all annuities. We ceded this land to create the United States. Negroes, Black people. So you can't have an Indian without the United States. You can't have a Black person without the United States. It's one and the same. So all I'm asking is that we include the Indian treaties along with what we're doing.
Take a picture.
Because that's extra money for us, and land. Make sure we get our land patents completed because they have to be completed. Our ancestors have the evidence. We made improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Our next speaker should be Ms. Cryer.
Good morning, task force members and community. My name is Sharice Cryer. I said I was not going to cut up today, but I must cut up for the community. There have been people who called in and spoke about integrity. And I want to let the commission know that I personally, and I was not the only one, prevented from coming into listening sessions that were co-hosted by the California Black Power Network. I want to let you know, I sent an email, I was not going to, but I was prevented from coming into not one, but 2 sessions. So when we talk about integrity in the community and people wanting to give input, and I've been doing this since 2018, okay? You can Google California reparations and my face comes up. My face was on the flyer for today, and I was one of the ones who helped put AB 3121 through the legislature. And I was prevented from coming into 2 sessions by the California Black Power Network. I just wanted to let you all know that. So lineage-based reparations is the standard for right now, and if you want something else, we are in a free country. You can put another bill through the legislature. That being said, yesterday, Harms versus National Model. The commission will run into a problem, and member Lewis, I spoke with you about this in April, and I spoke to another member yesterday about it, because you're going to run into a slippery slope argument. In theory, it works, but practically applying it to lineage-based eligibility is going to be an issue. You start splitting up what type of harms were experienced by Black Americans and assigning a dollar value to it. Other Americans experience the same harms. My suggestion would be for the task force to make sure the tie to slavery is solid in these calculations. The formula, for example, that the economists gave yesterday should include X amount of generational wealth lost because of slavery, plus amounts lost due to, for example, redlining, equals the value descendants are owed. Now, will California actually pay out that total amount? Probably not, but at least it gives a good gauge of the tie to slavery, and this is essentially the hybrid model that was mentioned yesterday. Also, when looking at international theories and models of reparations, I'd argue the U.S. has made the most reparations payments to any individual groups, and we make following U.S. precedent the standard as opposed to looking at an international standard. Finally, the issue of residency as far as determining eligibility. In common law, adverse possession is usually 7 years. In California, I believe it's 5. And I believe the task force should set residency requirements as follows. Eligible descendants must have been a resident in California at least 7 years before the governor signed AB 3121. I yield my time.
Ms. Cryer, thank you. You're right on point. Okay, just a reminder, before we go to the next caller, we have a list of folks who have signed up for public comment, and we're going through that list, and we'll be calling your name. So, Mr. Kevin, please go ahead.
Good morning, task force members and beautiful Black people here today. God is good. My name is Kevin. I'm the associate. Yeah, you can clap for that. Might be the only one I get today. I'm the associate director of the California Black Power Network. I'm fortunate to come right up after the last speaker. We're a coalition of 40-plus Black-led organizations across the state. We've been doing our work collectively together since at least 2015, and our groups have been doing this work, engaging Black communities for decades. We're fortunate to be at this historic point in time to engage the state of California and Black Californians in the conversation about reparations. It's important that we deal not only with the lingering aspects of slavery, but the system of white supremacy and anti-Black racism that not only propped up and propagated slavery, but kept Black people in a state of exploitation, brutalization, and second-class citizenship up until this very day. We engaged in May and June of this year about 20,000 Black people across the state on the issue of reparations. We identified 8,711 individuals who wanted to join our listening sessions. We wanted to have deep conversations with our community, so certainly we weren't able to engage all 8,711 people. We're interested in the commission being able to set up our communications firm and continue community engagement because we know there's a hunger for this conversation, and there have not been enough conversations in our community. There have not been enough people informed. To Ms. Cryer's comment, our first virtual session was Zoom bombed. You know, the devil's gonna get in the way, right, of a good thing. After that, we took deep precautions to make sure we were filtering who had access, particularly to our virtual and in-person sessions. We created a registration list of those who had signed up and said they were interested, and only allowed those who signed up and were registered into those. We also filtered out people who had previously attended listening sessions to make sure that we were hearing from new individuals. We were highly aware that there were a number of people from a certain organization who attended multiple sessions in an effort to, again, kind of thumb the scale. We think that we want to encourage this task force to be transparent, bold, courageous, expansive, and unifying. In its work, there's a diversity of opinion. We saw that through the Bunch Report. We've seen this through all of the engagement. You have an opportunity to unite folk and present recommendations that include all of the harm and recognize all of those who have been harmed. In America, you were black upon arrival. During slavery, if you came from Africa, if you came from the Caribbean, if you were a Native American, you were black upon arrival. During Jim Crow, during segregation, during the war on drugs, you were black upon arrival. The fact that you made a premature, rushed, and secret vote on eligibility is problematic, and it disrespects the community's voice. We would like that to be reconsidered and taken into account. There are opportunities that we agree that there should be special consideration for those who can trace their lineage back. But we also know and understand that the systems of white supremacy impact everybody who is black on this planet, in this country right here and right now.
Kevin,
Please be expansive,
I'm so sorry.
be inclusive.
Kevin,
Thank you for your time.
Your time is up. All right. All right, I'm going to do a time check-in with Chair Moore. Chair Moore. All right, can we be respectful? Thank you, everyone. All right, Chair Moore. I'm going to do a time check-in. It's about 10:06. And we have about...
Yes. Everyone... Yes. It's absolutely unacceptable. I made that announcement earlier this morning. Everyone has the right to speak. Everyone has 3 minutes to speak. Everyone needs to calm down.
Okay, so...
Excuse me, in respect of, if everyone is passionate about the issue of reparations, I need people to be quiet right now. This is disrespectful to the ancestors. You all need to be quiet. Okay.
So, Chair Moore, it's about 10:07, and we have several people still on the list. What is your pleasure and the task force pleasure at this point?
We're going to have to keep going with the schedule. So we're going to have to go to the next item on the agenda. You'll be the last person.
Imagine that. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
The next person would be Melvin. The next person would be Melvin G.
Could I have everyone's attention, please? Shh! Everybody, please. Let us make silence, please. Let us make silence.
Excuse me. I want to be short.
Let us make silence.
I'm going to say this before I leave.
Let us make silence. Let me say this.
Just so you have it.
We know how to behave. And we do not need to discredit ourselves. And somebody's back there appears to not have respect for our ancestors and respect for themselves. Now, please don't make it true. I am finished. You just be quiet, please. Madam Chair.
Okay. It's 10:10. We have witnesses on the line. We are going to end public comment right now. Thank you.
Yes.
Hello.
Please remember that you can submit your comments in writing. Okay.
So the
Remember,
next item on our agenda.
Chair Moore, we just wanted to remind everyone that please remember you can submit your written comments to reparationstaskforce@dlj.ca.gov. And thank you so much.
Sir, would you please sit down? Sir, would you please sit down? Please sit down. Please sit down. Please sit down.
Thank you. No, please, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Excuse me, sir, you spoke already yesterday. Please respect the space. We're moving on.
Thank you.
Okay, I took a picture of all the people who have yet to speak yet. We'll figure something out later. Thank you. All right. So the next item on the agenda is number 16, witness panel, examples of domestic and international reparations initiatives and models. Again, as I stated yesterday, if you read AB 3121, which is a statute that this task force scopes and powers are predicated on, it requires that our final recommendations comport with international human rights law standards. And so today we've invited expert witnesses in the field of domestic and international human rights law to describe and educate members of the public and the task force about different examples of domestic and international reparations initiatives and models around the world and in the United States. So we've invited Ron Wakabayashi, Mia Iwataki, Mitchell Maki, Virgine Latsich, and Ruben Carranza, who will be joining us remotely, and Jonathan Bush, who will be joining us remotely. I will now introduce our first expert witnesses who is here to meet us in person. The microphone. Hello, hello. Okay. Before I introduce our expert witnesses, I'm required. Right. Damon, if you could check your text messages. Okay. So we're going to just take a pause, a brief pause, and then I will introduce our expert witnesses.
Let me say this. As vice chair, we're going to have to bar this young man from this meeting. He's nothing but a provocateur, and he's not here to be focused on what we are about. So with everybody at the door from the staff, make sure that he does not come back in here.
Okay, we'll be ready to begin now. Thank you, Ron Wakabayashi and Mia Iwataki, for your presence. Ron Wakabayashi retired from the U.S. Department of Justice Community Relations Service in 2020 following a 20-year career. He served as regional director over 3 regions with 14 Western states and provided a 6-month stint as the acting deputy director. The Community Relations Service is known as America's Peacemakers, created in the Title X of the 1964 Civil Rights Act to provide community conflict resolution. He is the recipient of the Roger Wilkins Award for Lifetime Achievement. Post-retirement, Mr. Wakabayashi works with the Divided Communities Project at the Moritz School of Law at Ohio State University. At DCP, he provides services related to community conflict, Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, and hate crimes. Prior to his federal career, he was the executive director of the Los Angeles City Human Rights Relations Commission and then for the Los Angeles County Commission on Human Relations during the 1990s. In the 1980s, he accepted the position of the national director of the Japanese American Citizens League and served during the period of the campaign for redress and federal apology for the wartime incarceration of Japanese Americans. He concluded his service following the signing of the legislation by President Reagan. Mr. Wakabayashi's early career was centered on community building, established multiple nonprofit agencies, including the Asian American Drug Abuse Program. Then we will hear from Mia Iwataki. Mia Iwataki's life experiences as a poet, writer, host, producer of East Wind radio series, designer of diversity and cultural competency programs for LA County, NCRR fighter for Japanese American reparations, one of 30 women sponsored by the United Nations NGO to the UN Decade for Women Conventions in Nairobi, Kenya, and co-author of the first study on cultural barriers to reproductive health care in 8 API communities that have shaped a long life understanding, awareness, and commitment to justice and equity. Ms. Iwataki feels that her work has breathed life into the importance of valuing cultural beliefs, practices, and traditions in health and in our daily lives, and an appreciation for how deeply language is tied into and reflects our culture. We'll then hear from Mitchell Maki. Mitchell Maki is the president and CEO of the Go for Broke National Education Center, a nonprofit organization dedicated to preserving the legacy and lessons of the Nazi World War II veterans. Dr. Maki is a highly sought-after international speaker on the Japanese American redress movement and its relevance to contemporary socio-political issues. He is one of the leading scholars on the topic. Dr. Maki is the lead author of the award-winning book, Achieving the Impossible Dream: How Japanese Americans Obtain Redress, a detailed case study of the 1988 Civil Liberties Act. This critically acclaimed book documents the redress movement from its earlier roots during World War II. The formal introduction of the idea in the 1970s, the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians, the judicial battles during the 1980s, and the lobbying of the legislative and executive branches in the 1980s and 90s. In 2000, the book received the Gustavus Myers Outstanding Book Award, which is given to books addressing bigotry and human rights in North America. Thank you all for your presence, and we're looking forward to your expert testimony. And we will begin with Mr. Wakabayashi.
Chair Moore, thank you very much for that kind introduction of all 3 of us. With your permission, we'd like to change the order. I'm Mitchell Maki, I'll go first. Mr. Wakabayashi will go second, and Ms. Iwataki will go third. So thank you. Members of the task force, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity for us to present our thoughts and insights regarding the Japanese American community's fight for redress and reparation. My name is Mitch Maki, and I am the lead author of the book, Achieving the Impossible Dream: How Japanese Americans Obtained Redress. And as the title of the book suggests, for many people in the initial stages of that movement, the thought of obtaining redress seemed an impossible dream. And yet it did become a reality. Such is the hope for the work that your task force is committed itself to exploring. I'd like to start off by emphatically stating that I, nor my fellow panelists, make any claim to the equivalency between the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II and the institution of African American slavery, which stained our nation for 2.5 centuries. Rather, I intend to share some insights about the Japanese American redress experience, which I hope you'll find relevant to the work of the task force. I will focus my comments on 3 insights from the experience. Number 1, the importance of speaking with a unified voice. Number 2, the public commission hearings and the education of the general public and the American Congress. And number 3, the objective of redress for the Japanese American community. Number 1, speaking with a unified voice. In the initial stages of the Japanese American redress movement, there were many different perspectives on whether to pursue redress and reparations. There were basically 3 trains of thought amongst Japanese Americans. The first said, let it go. It happened a long time ago, we're doing better, we don't want to have to remember the pain, we don't want to have to remember and tell those stories, we don't want to have to feel those feelings again. And it was primarily the elderly who felt this way. The second group believed that what was done to us was wrong and that we were deserving of a good, sincere apology. Don't give us money, just give us a good, sincere apology. And part of that was being pragmatic because the nation had never apologized nor provided redress to any particular group at that time. However, there was a very principled reason, and that was, don't insult me. Don't take away my constitutional rights, throw a few dollars my way and say everything is now even. Don't put a price tag on my civil liberties. Just give us a sincere, authentic apology. And the final group believed that we were deserving of an apology, but we were also deserving of monetary redress. There were real losses. People lost their homes, people lost their jobs, people lost their businesses. It wasn't as if they just called us names and hurt our feelings. So give us an apology and give us money with that apology so that it is an authentic and legitimate atonement. The debate between these 3 trains of thought tore the community apart through the 70s. And the process of organizing and recruiting people to testify at the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians, and the process of listening to their testimonies played a large role in facilitating the Japanese American community to come together behind a perspective that we wanted an apology and monetary reparations. My co-panelists, Ron Wakabayashi and Mia Iwataki, were instrumental in those processes and will describe them more fully. Number 2, education of the public and the American Congress. The commission hearings and their subsequent findings, personal justice denied, played an invaluable role in educating the general public and the Japanese American community about the details of the World War II incarceration. In the early 1980s, the general American public and the U.S. Congress knew very little about this egregious violation of the Constitution. An important part of the redress movement was to educate the mainstream America about what had occurred. And an unintended consequence was how the commission hearings galvanized and energized the Japanese American community as Japanese Americans themselves learned many new details and perspectives on the camp experience. Of particular note, the commission chose to release their findings and their recommendations separately and 6 months apart. This was deliberate so that the general public and the members of Congress would have the time to be educated with the findings. Once again, my co-panelists will share examples that will further illuminate this insight. Finally, number 3, the objective of redress for Japanese American community. In the Japanese American community, there were competing perspectives on the objectives of the redress movement and what form redress should take. In the end, our community eventually agreed to a symbolic payment of $20,000 for each affected individual and the creation of a $50 million community trust fund. And we did this for many different reasons. The question of what amount of monetary redress was appropriate was a critical issue for the Japanese American community. Was a symbolic payment for the forced exclusion and incarceration appropriate and sufficient? On one hand, the actual dollar amount of the harm was incredibly much higher and probably would have made redress politically impossible. On the other hand, the symbolic nature of the redress payments could be seen as a slap in the face or a disingenuous attempt to pay the issue away. In the end, the level of monetary payments coupled with the presidential apology satisfied many in the Japanese American community, but left others feeling less than satisfied. I will end my comments here in order to allow time for my co-panelists to speak firsthand of their observations, memories, and insights about the Japanese American redress movement. In closing, I wish to thank you for your work. It is certainly not an easy task, but it is an opportunity to bring all of us to a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to just start with sharing an episode during this redress time that we were working in, and that was that the Sony Corporation saw the documentary Eyes on the Prize and made a decision to do a Japanese language version of that. So they dubbed it, and they disseminated it to every school in Japan. And I was one of the readers of an essay contest that followed that showing of Eyes on the Prize, which is about the struggle of African Americans in the civil rights movement. When I got my first stack of papers to read of the essays, the very first one was an 8th grade young girl in rural Japan. A young lady had never seen an African American in real life in her life. So her only picture of Asian American, of Black Americans was from the documentary and other things that she might have seen in the media. Her very first sentence in her essay was, "I have never seen people who love their country so much. I've never seen people who love their country so much." Now, I would suspect that that would not be the opening sentence of most American people viewing Eyes on the Prize. There are other lessons they would draw from it, and rightfully so. But I'm just trying to point out that fresh eyes looking at the experience and the struggle of African Americans is really a legacy that's really important, and it's something for Japanese Americans, is something that we have a deep appreciation for. And in fact, it was the civil rights movement and the anti-war movements in that period that raised the question for us. What do those issues being raised by African Americans, what do those issues mean for us? And in the mid-60s, Asian Americans started looking at those issues for the first time. And the discovery was, and we're talking about the camps. Now think about the camps. The entire community on the West Coast, 120,000 people, were uplifted from their homes in a matter of weeks and placed in desolate camps in 10 locations throughout the country. And in fact, today, when I leave here, there is a ceremony taking place at the Japanese American Museum. And that ceremony is the revealing of a new compilation, the compilation of 125,000 names of Japanese Americans who were locked up in 75 different locations by the United States government. We're still learning about what happened to us. We're still learning. But I want to kind of do some contextual things. The Japanese American community is a relatively small community. I know Senator Branford has some experience. He was a city councilman in a city called Gardena that has a few Japanese running around there. In fact, Ronnie Kajiri, one of your colleagues, was a JCL, Washington representative during his time of redress. Anyway, just a window on Japanese Americans, and just a few things, just to kind of give a framework and a lens. We're a very stratified community, meaning that the first generation immigrants, align in a cohort, in a time cohort that's very tight. And the second generation consequently, aligns as a separate cohort. And the third and the fourth, and this panel here, I think we're third generation. And we might even have some eighth generation in the room, because it's been that long. But the stratification is an aspect that's important to us. It's a unique experience. And to point out that the stratification is because of government laws, exclusion laws, policies, and practices that created, a situation. My own father, came into the country undocumented because, he was prohibited from coming into the country. So we have a stratified community. That meant that during the Second World War, our first generation were classed as enemy aliens. Not as persons ineligible for citizenship, but as enemy aliens, to make the case of military necessity, which was the case to lock us up. The stratification also has this impact. The average age of the second generation. Now, mind you, the first generation is now disempowered. They're enemy aliens. So the second generation, are the legal ones. They represent the community. The average age was 18 years old. Consider that, 120,000 people uplifted in a matter of weeks, placed in desolate areas. Their parents can no longer speak for the community. You're 18 years old and you've got to stand up for them. That's a hell of a situation to be in. And still, it doesn't compare to the African American experience. It doesn't compare, but this one to just kind of have a lens on what the Japanese American experience was. Fourth item was that we were less than 0.5% of the population of the United States. My own experience when I went to the East Coast for the first time, standing in a national zoo, was to have a lady come up to me and say, "What are you?" And we know what that means, what question's being asked. What are you? And then it goes to, where are you from? California. Where are you from? Los Angeles. No, where are you from? I think you're asking if I'm in my ancestry. My father came from Japan. Her response is, "Oh, stay right there. We want to take a picture of you." So in the 60s, with the impact of the Black Civil Rights Movement, me and I, when we were young, we were young once, we're examining that question. But imagine the lens that we looked at it through was through the lens of what we learned from the Black Civil Rights Movement and the anti-war movement. Is learning stand up, protest, dig in. A popular history of the Japanese American community at that time was a book called Nisei the Quiet American. Oh, you can imagine how the third generation took that. Quiet American. They are quiet. They are timid. They are passive. They didn't stand up. They're an embarrassment. We're ashamed of them. So how do you compensate that? During this time period, like that we were doing when I was at the JCL, I became a father. And what I remember most in being a father was that, I had a friend tell me that his son graduated high school. And they were talking, and the son said, Dad, you're well known. You're the inventor of the contact lens. Our family has, a lot of status in the community. But you were never there when I needed you. Imagine hearing that from your kid. You were never there when we needed you. But amplify that. That's a generational statement that happened. Third generation, felt that our second generation, our parents' generation, failed. I think my point here is that we're a community, as we were coming through it, is a community without heroes. That's a terrible position to be in. Because in my life, I've met some heroes. I've had the great honor of being with Rosa Parks. I've had the extreme honor of having C.T. Vivian tell me about his encounter with Jim Clark. They're heroes. Jim Clark's smaller than, C.T. Vivian is smaller than me, as I recall. He's not a large man. And Jim Clark was a good-sized dude, and he clocked him, sucker punched him, at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. But C.T. Vivian and our own, and James Lawson here in Los Angeles, brought the principle of nonviolence to Martin Luther King. So we share heroes. But we didn't have any in the Japanese American community, or so we thought. In the process of hearings, what we rediscovered, the work that Mitch does right now is with our veterans, 442nd. Before the commission hearings happened, think of this. I am the national director of the Japanese American Citizens League. And I know nothing of our wartime history in terms of our military history. Turns out that the curator of the Presidio Army Museum takes me over there and says, you need to understand this story. This is an epic story. These men were the most decorated unit for their size and length of service in the history of the country. They retired units if they took 50% casualty. Mitch, what'd they take? 350% casualty? 350, they were replaced 3.5 times. So we had a lot of Gold Star mothers. And they got notice in the concentration camps. And if you read the mail that the Nisei soldiers sent out, they talked about, we understand the need for us to be loyal, to be perceived as loyal, because we are a suspect community. But guess what? Out of this process, pre-hearing and post-hearing, we got this marvelous gift. We got heroes. In the ceremony that will happen later today, I'm representing one of the camps, Aurora in Arkansas. My family, my father's side was in Aurora, Arkansas. But they then got sent to Tule Lake. Of the 10 camps, Tule Lake was the camp that was a segregation camp. They were for the people who resisted, who were going to renounce their citizenship, who were going to go back to Japan, not willingly, but because they were standing up to saying, we're going to resist because our rights are being denied. The resistors, and I got to tell you, I was the JCL National Director. The JCL was not friendly toward the resistors because the JCL had an interest in promoting that theme of having the country perceive us as loyal. And the resistors, took away from that, that kind of account. So I just want to give you context of what we went through. But what I'm trying to point out is that in our experience, what we went through, the $20,000 You know, and I can tell you the story of the $20,000. The $20,000, you know, we didn't have a special field order 15 as a basis of calculation to even think about it. So there was a back of the envelope activity one time when someone said, well, minimum wage at that time for the length of time that the camps were in operation would roughly equate to about $25,000. And so that became a why not? What else? We had no precedent. So that was a number that the JCL, you know, adopted. And I want to point out, initially, you know, with the approaches that that our communities had on redress, and Mitch made reference to it, is that there were folks who said, look, this was wrong. We know it was wrong. We know our community. It was just plain wrong. We were not a military necessity. It was not a problem. And so, because we knew it was so wrong, people said, why mess around with a commission bill? So, people wanted, you know, direct class action. Mia will talk a little bit about, you know, what Mervyn Dimely did. Another Congressman, Mike Lowry, also introduced a money bill. You know, they were not successful, you know, in terms of passage. But the commission bill was a compromise. And I'll tell you the truth, at the very beginning of all of this, when we sat down with the Japanese American members of Congress, we had 5 members of Congress. It was a unique situation. You know, pretty strong guys. In that meeting, what they told us was, we don't have a chance. We don't have a chance to get a bill. But we do have a chance for a marvelous public education campaign where people can know this story and know that we were here and that we had heroes and we had mothers and we had resistors. The $20,000 that the commission recommended was just kind of an action they took because they didn't want to be perceived as being in the JCL's pocket, so they didn't want to say 25. It was an arbitrary number. It was enough not to be insulting in that time period, you know, and it was enough to get by. And even for the Japanese American community, I think it was enough to get by. You know, today, you know, it's student loan forgiveness is $20,000. I don't think it'd be acceptable to us today, even as a symbolic gesture, but at the time it was. So, you know, that's acceptable for its time and place. 20,000 is all right. That shouldn't be a guide for what happens with African American reparations. What's documented in this magnificent piece that Mike, you and your staff put together at the Department of Justice is just remarkable, just remarkable. And it's by itself the gift that this task force already gives to the community and to ourselves. So I think our basic thing, and I really departed from my text here because I just wanted to just talk to you, because Don gave my presentation yesterday, and he did it, you know, like impromptu yesterday, because I think that's what we feel. You know, I want to leave with this kind of one kind of image, and those of us who are in this work that's kind of referred to as DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some of you know there's a graphic. This is hard to see. But I don't know if you this graphic of that's supposed to explain equity, of boys looking over a fence to see a baseball game. And one is tall enough to look over the fence. And another needs 1 box to see over. And the youngest one needs 2 boxes. So these images, one is equal is to give everyone a box, regardless of what their situation is. The other one is it's identified for their needs. So it's a equality, equity kind of graphic that shows there. Earlier this week, I was talking to a friend of mine, Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas was a key figure in another redress activity of sorts. He was active in responding to the Trayvon Martin killing. He was the city manager in Sanford, Florida. Andrew looked at this, and he raised a question, and it's what I want to leave you with. Who put up the fence, and why did they put up the fence? Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Good morning. I'm going to take a different road a little bit. I was with the National Coalition for Redress and Reparations, which was a grassroots organization, and I'll kind of be sharing our journey in the campaign for redress and reparations. But first, I want to acknowledge the difference in our fight for reparations for the injustice of the concentration camps and the 400 years of history of enslaved people. We're not here to make recommendations or to prescribe lessons learned. I'm here to share the experiences of NCRR and all volunteer grassroots organization that fought for reparations and to express our continuing solidarity for Black reparations today. So, thank you. Historically, California was ground zero for anti-Japanese hate and anti-Asian legislation. This set the stage for imprisoning Japanese Americans in World War II concentration camps. We recognize the origin of this violence and racism began with the white supremacist and colonialist actions against indigenous peoples and kidnapped and enslaved Africans. And we see that winning Black reparations is specific, deserved, and long overdue. And your victory will give hope and inspiration to other communities. I feel like this is a political rally. So, my mother was imprisoned in Manzanar concentration camp. My dad was a staff sergeant in the 10442nd, as Ron said, the all-Japanese segregated Army unit that suffered more casualties and won more medals of valor than any other Army unit of its size in the history of the U.S. Army, a story that we share with the Tuskegee Airmen. Like so many Nisei, second-generation Japanese Americans, they didn't talk to us about the camp. We grew up not knowing our own history, a history that's been deliberately kept from us in school, just as we're seeing with the CRT today. Our parents' silence about camp came out of the trauma, anger, shame, and wanting to shield us from the viciousness of racism and incarceration. They carried an unspoken fear that this could happen again, because they heard of that legislation in Congress to sterilize all Japanese American women of childbearing age that was narrowly defeated. It had intergenerational consequences. We were told, keep a low profile. The nail that sticks its head up gets its head pounded down. We were becoming invisible. The checkbox marked other. My parents told us we had to be twice as good as white people to succeed. That despicable label, model minority, was used as a divide and conquer tactic to drive a wedge between us and other communities. Finally, in the 60s and 70s, with the civil rights and the Black and Chicano power movements, young Asians were energized. We were inspired by leaders like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Fred Hampton. We modeled our Serve the People programs after the Black Panthers' free breakfast and free healthcare programs, and we marched in solidarity to free political prisoners like George and Jonathan Jackson, which set the future stage for the Free Chol Soo-Lee movement. We learned and lived Third World unity, the power of grassroots organizing, and our history through the movement for social justice. I first heard about reparations through the Republic of New Africa, who also told us about Queen Mother Moore and the Deacons for Defense, and I had read about it in the Panthers' 10-point program. As Ron and Mitch talked about, there were several national Japanese American organizations with different strategies for reparations. JACL was more mainstream and took a legislative avenue. NCJAR was looking at a class action suit. The Quorum Nobis Supreme Court Committee that was Member Don Tamaki played a key role in, was looking towards overturning the Supreme Court case against camps. And then there was NCRR. Our founding members were 60s and 70s movement activists. Our principles of unity called for uniting Japanese Americans around reparations, restitution to the community, overturning the legal basis for the camps, and demanding direct individual monetary reparations now. I know that I'm really cutting everything close, but these were the days before there was social media. So organizing and outreach meant getting in your car and driving places. So I was sent to a town hall meeting in Gardena, which had the largest Japanese American population outside of Hawaii in those days, right, Steve Bradford? The keynote speaker in that town hall meeting was Congressman Mervyn Dimely, and I was there to ask him what his position was on reparations. He wanted to know more and invited me to his office. We talked. The next weekend, he came to the NCRR steering committee meeting and offered to introduce legislation calling for reparations. Mervyn Dimely is an unsung hero of our reparations movement. But the bill to establish the Presidential Study Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians, the CWRIC bill, passed. We weren't happy like a lot of other people. We were concerned that the study commission would delay reparations for our elders who were already in their 80s and 90s. We were concerned that the hearings would be Washington, D.C. centered, and we wanted to ensure that the voices of our community, the voices of our people, would be highlighted at those hearings. NCRR lobbied those commissioners. We said, to have meaningful hearings, you have to go to every major city with a significant Japanese American population. Fortunately, we had 20 days of hearing in 10 cities and had 750 testimonies. 750 people broke their silence. The first hearing was in LA. We wanted to set the tone and make sure that it was a people's hearing, but it was harder than we thought. Breaking a 40-year silence was difficult. It would be the first time folks would talk about camp, and the first time for most people to speak publicly, and then to speak before a presidential commission was even more intimidating. So we had to do a lot of work. We did outreach with the churches, marketplaces, posted flyers, house meetings, workshops, practice sessions for folks, coordinated transportation, and it paid off. We had to get an extra hearing room in the state building for the overflow crowds. We had an extra evening hearing for working folks. There was good media coverage every day, which was really important to us because most of the country didn't even know about the camps or care about it. During the lunch breaks at the hearings, we provided obento lunches and programs with solidarity speakers from other communities to build allyship. The value of these hearings were incredible, as Ron said. Standing up and speaking out was powerful and transforming for our community that was told to be quiet Americans. The testimonies educated my entire generation. Those stories exposed a little-known history, and the hearings gained national media attention and started generating support. Those hearings and our people that spoke put a human face on the Japanese American concentration camp experience for the nation and for the world. And each testimony of family separation, lives lost, stolen lands, peeled layer after layer and revealed an ugly core of white supremacy, systemic racism, and economic exploitation. The commission report, Personal Justice Denied, called it race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership, they found no military necessity for the camps. The commission recommended a presidential apology, the Civil Liberties Education Fund, and direct monetary reparations. It was immediately put into legislation where we faced a real uphill battle in Congress, maybe similar to what the task force will be facing when they introduce the legislation in the state and Senate and Assembly. For us, we were such a small population, gaining allies was really crucial to our campaign. We needed to get those votes. One advantage was that we had 4 Japanese American legislators who were leading the fight in Congress. It was like years, and finally, Congressman Norman Ninetta called and said, "The big vote is taking place. It's do or die. NCRR, you got to pull out the stops." It was the call we were waiting for, and so we went into organizing mode, as did all the organizations in the community. We ended up organizing a delegation of 141 grassroots lobbyists. And these were folks from all walks of life: gardeners, doctors, attorneys, truck drivers, students, elders. These people saved up their money and saved up their vacation time and went to Washington, D.C. to fight for justice and redress. Now, I want to put in another high five for Congressman Mervyn Dimely. He was the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, which stood behind the Japanese American reparations all the way. They were the strongest allies. They brought the Hispanic Congressional Caucus with them too. And Congressman Dimely flew me out to Washington, D.C. 3 weeks early so I could schedule 101 lobby visits. He offered his office as kind of an unofficial headquarters for our grassroots lobbyists. And none of them ever had lobbied before. None of us had ever lobbied before. And so, 141 people getting lost, losing their schedules. The congressman's office was like our lighthouse. We won 243 to 141 in the Senate, and of course, senators like Sparky Matsunaga almost single-handedly got those 69 votes in the Senate. In August 1988, the Civil Liberties Act was signed by, why did it have to be President Reagan? Then began the whole ordeal of fighting for appropriations and then working to identify folks. But that's a whole other long story that you can read in NCRR's book. Okay, so what is our legacy? What are the takeaways? Well, one, the importance of the hearings. It was the opportunity for our people to stand up, stand together, and speak out, and it unified our community. Those testimonies put a spotlight on the role and the character of the United States government. And I believe that our community recognized through that our shared history with other communities of color in this country. The campaign, the struggle for redress connected the dots for us as we saw our commonalities. So when 9/11 happened, Japanese Americans were among the first to step out and speak out against the racial profiling that was being done to the Muslims, because we know what racial profiling does. When ICE started to try to open some of the detention camps that once imprisoned us to house families seeking asylum, Japanese Americans stood up. And then when black reparations began building up steam, Japanese Americans stepped forward and saw that as part of our struggle. The other thing is the importance of unity. There were differences in our community, and NCRR, and I think back from the movement days, our principles of unity always talked about building unity, and from unity comes strength. And even people like Congressman Mineta, he kept admonishing us, you got to present a united front to the public. Keep the infighting within our family. Lastly, we connected the dots. This whole struggle connected the dots. We connected the dots between the civil rights and the Black liberation movement and the Asian movement. Connected the dots from the lessons and principles from the Asian movement, which informed NCRR's grassroots campaign. The campaign for redress was part of an overall struggle for social justice that continues today with Nikkei Progressives and NCRR, which now is known as Nikkei for Civil Rights and Redress. In May of this year, we formed a national coalition of Japanese Americans to stand in solidarity with the fight for Black reparations today. And lastly, I really want to give a shout out to the AB 3121 Task Force report. The history and the knowledge in this report is so important, and it's important to all communities. It's a continuing part of what was supposed to be our work in the community, the community fund that we got in the bill that they short shrifted us from $50 million down to $5 million. Part of that was to be worked towards non-repetition. Well, with your report, we can continue that work for non-repetition. And with our new National Nikkei Reparations Coalition, at our last meeting, we talked about we're going to beta test your report for a book club. Maybe taking, 1 or 2 chapters at a time and using that as a tool, not only to further educate ourselves and our community, but to organize and mobilize people in support of African American reparations. So again, the Japanese American Redress and Reparations movement was not an isolated campaign. It was part of a continuation of a legacy of building a movement that continues today. And we want to thank you for letting us share our experience and to continue to stand in solidarity with Black reparations.
Thank you, Mr. Wakabayashi, Ms. Iwataki, and Mr. Maki for your esteemed expert testimony. We'll now turn to our fourth expert witnesses, which is Virgine Lasich and Ruben Carranza. Before we go to our witnesses, we will have some remarks from Vice Chair Brown, and we're going to take questions and comments as well at the end.
Before they leave, I want them to hear this. Before you leave, please.
Mia.
Madam Chair and members of the task force, I beg for personal privilege to say something. Some people just always must say something. But I hopefully have something to say. And I want to sincerely apologize for raising my voice to that young man. But I became righteously indignant over his behavior. Because on yesterday, he insulted our member of this task force, Brother Don. And I about had enough. It's so unfortunate that what you have shared, he could have been privy to and would have learned something if he were permitted to stay in the room. For it did not just begin with our panelists, our brother Ron, in terms of this mixed team of culture and commonality of suffering from racism. It began a long time ago. And those of you who have made 8 in 1 like I have, I want to let you know today that in 1943, Dr. Alfred Fisk and Dr. Howard Washington Thurman, a black man and a white man, when this nation was so unkind to the Japanese community, founded a church in San Francisco on Russian Hill that became the Fellowship Church of All People. They were the first interfaith aggregation to come out swinging, calling out America for the crimes against the Japanese community. And when I witnessed that young man who came here with no manners, didn't realize what my mother told me when I left home in Jackson, Mississippi. Amos, behave. Mind your manners. Don't ask for anything. Don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. And be kind to everybody. So, thank God this day that we have a repeat in 2022 of the Japanese and the black community working together.
For that personal lift up. I appreciate it, and also his words of unification. There are many differences between the African American reparations movement and what Japanese Americans went through. I think it's plainly clear from the speakers there's no equivalence in the harm, certainly. But I think there are 3 takeaways on this journey that are similar. The first one, which was accomplished in the first year of the task force, was to shine a light on the harm, this buried and erased history. And the manifestation of that is the interim report. Now it's our job to amplify that and make sure it penetrates America's consciousness. The second thing that we're engaging on now is to develop forms of reparations. We went through that and it was briefly discussed by the 3 speakers. The third thing after that, when the recommendations in June of 2023 are presented to the legislature, is the organizing campaign. This is a campaign, it is a movement. And so that, in many ways, is the most crucial aspect. And Mia Iwataki, Ron Wakabayashi, and Mitch Maki talked about the importance of the organizing effort. So I think, those are the three things that I think are similar and are applicable. And I want to thank them for their eloquent testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next expert witnesses we'll be hearing from are Regine Latsich and Ruben Carranza. Ruben is the current Reparative Justice Program Director at the International Center for Transitional Justice. He has worked for 22 years in the field of human rights, international justice, and anti-corruption. He has taught human rights at New York University, advised the International Criminal Court, United Nations agencies, and various governments on designing and implementing transitional justice measures, including reparations measures for human rights violations, war crimes, and historical injustices. In his work for the ICTJ, Mr. Carranza has guided Global South policymakers on transitional justice approaches that cover remedies for economic and social rights violations, seek the recovery of ill-gotten assets, and address the root causes of conflict, inequality, and marginalization. Regine Latsich is a senior expert at the International Center for Transitional Justice. She currently leads ICTJ's work in the United States and Australia, as well as the Children and Youth Program. She has provided guidance and technical expertise to a wide range of transitional justice approaches across the globe, including Canada, Colombia, Cote d'Ivoire, Cyprus, Liberia, the Gambia, Kenya, Nepal, Tunisia, and Uganda. Across all of her work, Latsich focuses on how engaging citizens, particularly youth, in transitional justice processes can serve to catalyze broader public debate and ongoing civic activism. Committed to listening to survivors and problem solving with them to advance effective responses, Ms. Latsich seeks to open spaces for more inclusive participation in policy and programming discussions. Mr. Ruben Carranza and Ms. Regine Latsich are joining us remotely, and they may begin their testimony when they're ready. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the chair for those introductory remarks and for the invitation to speak with you today. We're deeply honored and humbled. As you said, my name is Virginie Latsich. I'm joined here by my colleague Ruben Carranza, and we work at the International Transitional Justice. And what we share with you, brief remarks from our work that we hope are applicable and provide some inspiration for what you're preparing to do in California. Very brief introduction. The International Center for Transitional Justice is an international non-profit organization. We have in New York with us office in the world. We work side with
Ms.
to obtain
Latsich,
knowledge,
Ms.
address,
Latsich,
and relations for human rights.
Ms. Latsich, I
Yes.
need to pause for a minute because your audio is glitching. So we need to take a pause to try to figure out what's going on.
Okay. All
We
right.
might need to use them to test it out.
See.
Can you just say testing, testing, just to make sure we can hear you clearly?
Something better? With headphones?
Just continue to say testing, testing. I want to make sure there's no break in the audio.
Sure. Okay. Testing, testing, testing,
One moment.
testing. This is Virginie.
Just one moment. The tech people said one moment. So just.
Testing. Now, better? Testing.
Turn your camera off, that may help.
Hear me any better now? Testing, testing.
I think we can hear you great now, so you can begin. Thank you so much.
Okay. Camera off then? Yes. Maybe if you can show the PowerPoint instead of my video, maybe that will work better. All right. Do you hear me fine?
Yes. Yes, it's better. Thank you.
All right. Well, I was just, it's better? Okay, great. Thank you so much. I was just saying briefly by way of introduction, the International Center for Transitional Justice is an international nonprofit organization with headquarters in New York and offices in 6 countries around the world. We work side by side with victims to obtain acknowledgement, redress, and reparations for massive human rights violations. Hold those responsible, build prevent oppression. We do work is by relevant example. Is noted is different and you. What we have in our work, certain less that are across certain.
Oh, sorry,
strategies that
Ms.
inspiration and other
Lasich. Ms. Lasich, we're still
Yeah.
having trouble hearing you, so maybe we can hear from Mr. Carranza to
Okay.
test if it's just
Let's-
you or Mr. Carranza.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, hear me.
This is system.
Do you have the same issues hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, give me a second. I'll use headphones as well. Call me. On to. Oh.
Maybe they can call in or something. They can call in.
Test, test. You hear me?
So just read the stuff.
Um,
So can they call in? Okay.
we can actually.
Okay. So Ms. Lasich and Mr. Carranza, I think there's some trouble with the Wi-Fi in the venue, and so we are working on having you all call in instead. So just stand by for now. We are going to take a brief recess. Thank you. We'll be back.